Board.
Yeah.
Welcome to the February 7th Select Board meeting for the town of Millis. We have with us tonight Aaron Underhill and Craig Schultz, the other members of the Select Board. Tonight's meeting, just so everybody understands, is a working session meeting. As such, we are not going to have any participation from the audience tonight. I just want to make that clear up front so that everyone understands that we like having you here, but this is not an interactive session this evening. We have a few announcements to go through at the very beginning. One of them is that I wanted to make notice, just give me 1 second here, a departed member of the community, Buzz, or Herman Buzz Downey. He helped set up emergency centers, worked with the town in a variety of positions, and he just passed away. So we thought we'd give a brief recognition to Mr. Downing and thank him and his family for all the service that he did for our community. Another point I'd like to make is the Lions Club is still selling raffle tickets to try to fund the sign that they want to put out front of this building for the town. So I encourage everyone to contact them and see if there's any way you can help in that matter. One other thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that on February 8th, the PFAS Interagency Task Force will hold its 10th meeting. It's open to the public. It goes from 10 to 11. If you have any interest in attending, you ought to get in touch with them or with Karen. She can probably give you access, information on how to get in touch with them. We did send a correspondence to them indicating some of the concerns we had as a town, and specifically noting the amounts of money that we're looking at and asking for anything they can do to help fund us as a result of this unfunded mandate. I think that pretty well covers the basics. Are there any other announcements that anybody, you have, Karen, are you aware of? Okay, then I'm going to open the opening session with Mr. Weiss, Robert Weiss, who is the man who wears many hats in this town, but this is regarding economic development and the town's issuing of a license for Advisa, who plans to have a manufacturing facility in town. So, Bob, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, it's Robert Weiss, Economic Development Director this evening. And I apologize if there's no video. I don't know what's going on, but I hesitate to press the wrong button on my computer. So this evening,
I think it's a lens cap.
I'll look for it tomorrow. Thanks, Craig. This evening, I'm asking the board to authorize our town administrator to sign the municipal response form to the Cannabis Control Commission. This is regarding the application of Visa Wellness to establish a manufacturing operation for cannabis in the town. The document asks us if the applicant is in compliance with municipal bylaws and ordinances. And after the staff and town council has reviewed the document and what's been going on in cannabis operations in town, we found that Advisa is not yet in compliance with all of the town's bylaws. They have not yet applied for their special permit from the planning board, nor for their environmental review or their noise or odor permitting. We have spoken to them, to Advisa, and they have informed us that they will be applying shortly to the planning board for the special permit. And so we ask that the town administrator check off the box that says not in compliance, and we will explain that they are in zoning compliance, but not in compliance with the rest of the requirements of the planning board.
And what do you want us specifically to do at this point, Bob?
I think all you need to do is a motion that authorizes Mr. Gazinski to sign and complete the, what's it called, the municipal response form to the Cannabis Control Commission.
Okay.
I'll make a
First
motion to
ask if there are
authorize
any-
this.
I'll first ask if there are any questions from the members of the board. Okay, in which case, I'll take a motion. Sorry, Craig.
Got it teed up in my head now. I make a motion to grant Mr. Gazinski the authority to sign on behalf of the board.
The municipal response, right. The
Municipal response on behalf of the board.
Right, very good.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to authorize Mr. Gazinski, the town administrator, to sign the municipal response form to the Cannabis Control Commission regarding the Advisa Wellness Incorporated. And we understand they have yet to comply with a number of items, but that box will be checked accordingly. I will poll the board. Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mr. Jermaine, yes. Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Okay, it's been authorized, and so please move forward with that, Mr. Weiss.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.
You are welcome. Okay, the next item before the board is the authorization of the contract, sales contract, and that'll be for the fire truck and for the ambulance. I will ask Mr. Gazinski to inform us of how we want to proceed on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure the board recalls, you did approve this at your last meeting in order to meet some time constraints, but it wasn't formally posted on the agenda, so this is just a formal ratification on a follow-up meeting. For the record, just for a ratification of the approval of the contracts for the new fire truck and the new ambulance through the fire department. So just ask for a vote of approval and ratification for those two contracts, Mr. Chairman.
That sounds great. I'll take a motion. Let's take it each one separately, and please identify specifically the price associated with each contract.
Hold on.
I'm going to scroll up to the top to find it. Yeah.
I'm scrolling too.
Oh. How about if I move that we recognize the sales contract and approve the sales contract for the ambulance in the amount of $339,561.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the contract as stated. I'll poll the board. Mr. Jermaine, yes. Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
So approved. Okay, the next one is the fire truck.
I found it now, so I can make a motion to approve the contract for the fire truck for $639,013.
Second.
So moved and seconded to approve the fire truck purchase in the amount of $639,013. I'll poll the board. Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Jermaine, yes. Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
So approved. Is
Okay,
that?
thank you very much.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. Okay. Ms. Gonzalez, you have a taxable update agreement for all tax-exempt real property.
Yes, I'm asked. Did I connect correctly?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm asking the board to approve the contract with Vision for $28,000 for our recertification program. $14,000 was funded in fiscal year 2022, and the remaining $14,000 will be funded in fiscal year 2023. The recertification is for fiscal year 2023, but it is a two-year fiscal process to complete the recertification.
Okay. I'll take a motion. Can we just do it for the full 28, or do we have to break it into separate?
No, you can do it for the full 28. My only question is, will Mike sign for the board, or will you as the chair sign for the board?
I think we'll also include authorization for Mike to sign for the
Okay,
board.
thank you. Thank you.
If the other members of the board are willing to do that.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Vision Government Solutions for $28,000 and authorize the town administrator to sign on behalf of the board.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the contract for $28,000 for Vision and have the town administrator sign on behalf of the board in the amount not to exceed $28,000. I'll poll the board. Mr. Jermaine, yes. Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
So approved.
Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. That brings us to, I believe, the primary topic for discussion this evening. And as I stated earlier, this discussion within the board, within certain members of the town administration who will participate in town council. So what we have with us tonight is we have a draft of the bylaw. The first thing I think we should deal with is the sewer bylaw. And there have been a number of issues and advisories listed by groups that we need to consider in making sure that this gets drafted and finalized. And our object tonight is to finalize the draft of the bylaw. I think some information has been handed out. We've passed information around through the town administrator. And what I'd like to do is go through tonight and get all of these concerns on the table and see if we can resolve them and finalize the draft. We have Jay Tellerman here from our town, as our town council, who will help us in finalizing that draft or answering issues as they come up from a legal perspective. So I'll open it that way. I have a list in front of me of some issues. I don't pretend that it's definitive. It's what I think was sent out to everyone. If you have additional items, please chime in at any time. The first item I had on there was the time frame for the sewer hookup. In the existing draft that we have, it says 1 year, but I want to make sure we're all in agreement as to what that time frame should be and if there is any discussion on that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'd say just with construction delays and everything else, I would be comfortable extending it to 18 months if we needed to. I'm okay with that if needed.
Okay. I'm just going to play a devil's advocate on this because I happen to think 18 makes some sense. Would it be better to say 12 months, but they can apply for an extension if they find that there's a reason, like they can't contract or whatever? What would be
Just
better?
I would just say 18 months and be done with it, because if we're going to automatically grant an extension, or I don't want to make this any more complicated with hearings to grant an extension for 6 months, you know, if it's going to be a perfunctory extension.
My concern, I'll be very frank, is I'm hearing that some of the supplies that they might need may be difficult to get. Their contractors are very tied up. My only concern is it may take some people more than the 18 months. So all I'm asking is we can give it 18, that's fine, and they could still come to us and apply for an extension. But I'm just asking one more time, but I happen to agree that in general principle, 18 may be better.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Are we working this from the top down, starting with 1A for connections?
That's the way I would do it, I think, but
Is that what we're talking about right now?
That's what I was trying to do, yes.
Okay, good. All right. So what's in the agenda, what this says is the connection must be made within 1 year from either the effective date of the bylaw or the date that the town sewer service is fully constructed and becomes available to said property, whichever is later. So doesn't that cover that?
Well, theoretically, if you lived on a street like Clues Road and weren't connected now, there's already sewer there. And when this becomes effective, let's say in June, and you drag your feet until the following June, because that's a year, and then you find out that, and then you drag your feet a little longer and find out that come November, December, they can't do the work because the ground's frozen. Now you've exceeded your 18 months, theoretically. I don't know enough about construction to say that would be an issue, But I think we've given them enough time with 18 months if the sewer comes by their house to realistically probably get it in. And as
Yeah.
you pointed out, as commissioners, we can always take hardship into account, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's people out there that are going to procrastinate and
Yeah.
or just not do it. I mean, there's only, you know, so much you can give there, but I'd be okay with 18 months instead of a year in that section.
Okay. I will bring up one point only. I just think it's important to do these things. And that is, during this period, of course, we're still constrained with sewer capacity. So the longer we put it off, the constraint remains in place. I just state that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't go with 18 months. I just want to make sure we're all cognizant of that issue.
I'm hoping to address that through the second item on the agenda that we get into.
Okay. I'm trying to make sure we hit the points one by one.
If we do not put a moratorium in place at some point, we may want to revisit that using Mike's philosophy with union and negotiations.
We'll get to the moratorium issue very shortly, I promise.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we're in agreement, we'll go with 18 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aaron, Craig, myself,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so we're going to put in 18 months there. Now, I have in the notes, extensions may be granted with one extension. I think, I don't remember where that was, but it was a little later down in here. Do you want to discuss the extension at this point? Or
Let's move these through these sequentially, I think. I think
Okay.
Aaron was onto something.
Yeah, let's do, it'll get too confusing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the next item you would like to discuss?
So B, the connections B,
Yeah.
1B, for 1 year following, the sewer connection fee will be, I think we had talked about it being eliminated. So there would be no connection fee from the town.
Yeah. I'll tell you what my concern is.
Okay.
If we do that, I think we open ourselves to some legal issues. Because people who have already paid that sewer connection fee are going to be irate that they paid a fee, and because these other people procrastinated, and now we need them to connect, they have paid a fee and these folks don't have to pay it. Now, I'm going to open that to ask Mr. Tellerman if that presents a legal issue for us.
Well, I think it does a little bit, maybe not exactly for the reasons that you state, Pete, because I don't think there's any way for people to claw back that charge. What I think it opens you up to is essentially future challenges with respect to any fee setting here. You know, fees are designed to be commensurate with the cost of the services rendered. So we choose fees not as a money-making device, although they're an important part of municipal revenue, but rather to cover the costs based on a reasonable estimation of what it's going to cost the town administratively to oversee the design, inspection, et cetera, of the connection. So if you eliminate it altogether, you're essentially forecasting, well, this doesn't really cost us anything. So I'm more worried about someone challenging a fee when you then impose it later than someone trying to claw back a fee that they may have paid a few years ago. The latter scenario is more of an optics issue, and I think has, you know, potential impacts on how town meeting may view this and vote on it. But I'm not sure it creates a legal issue per se. Does that mean that someone won't challenge or try and get a refund or something like that? It doesn't. I just think we have a little more insulation. So I'm a little wary about offering any reduction from not from a legal purpose, but from a purpose that fees are fees. They're not some other kind of revenue setting device, and they should be set at a number that is going to reflect the cost to the town to have these things connected. There are other means, probably a little bit more cumbersome here than you need to get into, to help subsidize those through separate appropriation that may help subsidize that, or through some kind of borrowing or lien-based thing to help ease the cost of that. But if you do a discount, I would A, make it somewhat nominal, and B, make sure you check with Jim McKay and others that the fee charged will still cover your expenses, because otherwise it's got to come from somewhere else.
So maybe we consider just adding, revisiting a connection fee discount or waiver with the section about hardship.
Well, what if we just extend the period to pay and say, okay, during that period, if you meet the payment schedule, you won't be charged any interest or something like that?
I was under the impression when Jim talked to us, I don't know if Millis DPW is Jim or not, that there are very little nominal costs associated with this on our end. It is, Jim. Thank you. Okay. It's playing a hunch. But there's nominal costs, but we're one of the higher towns in the area as far as charging a fee to hook up. So maybe this is a chance for us as sewer commissioners to revisit our fee structure and see if a reduced fee structure going forward makes sense, and just implement that at this point also. That would be my thought. Jim, I don't know what our fee structure is.
I like that idea. How about if we did that along with extending the period if people need that?
Yeah, I'd like to find out what our current fee is, and then what other towns are charging, so we can get an idea of what the true cost and what our true cost would probably be to inspect. Realizing it's not zero, but it may not be, I don't know, 3,000, 3,500. I can't remember the number that we do charge.
Why don't we ask Mr. McKay, since he is probably a wealth of knowledge in this area?
So the fee to hook up is $4,094, and in that, it's built in there as just the day-to-day expenditures of the rate increase that we put out for the sewer customers each year. I don't know, I can get a list of, what surrounding towns do pay, but it hasn't gone up in, I'd say in the last 5 or 6 years, at least 6 years, that has not gone up. But the water is, significantly less. It's $2,450, and this is $4,094. And it's just built into the rate structure. So every year that we do the increase, that it's how many of them come in, and it's an estimated, whether it be 25, 50, or 100. And with all the hookups that we've had recently, it's been, a significant amount of money because of all the Toll Brothers, even though that's at a prorated rate, but with all the other tie-ins that we've had.
Jim?
Yep.
Would it make any sense to try to offer an extended period with no interest, or is that going to cause a problem?
So as the tie-in fee, they have to come up with the check right away with the payment. They don't pay it over time. They don't pay it in a monthly fee. It's paid like right away.
So Jay, is our fear with reducing it to zero that we'll never be able to put it back to 2,000, 4,000 or something?
No, I'm not saying never. I think you just open yourself up to a challenge at that point. I think you're also putting Jim in the position of having to find that money elsewhere. The costs are the costs, and there is a cost to Jim's department and other departments in town for administering the connection. So you're essentially asking others to subsidize it, which again is okay. You don't have to charge anything to anyone for connections, but someone's going to pay for it.
I'm more inclined to try to extend time. I understand Jim's point that they pay at the time they connect.
Pete, I guess my only concern there is we are adding significant complexity to something, and you were talking about establishing liens on top of the liens that already exist under the betterments, and so I'm a little wary of, just from a passage standpoint, is that these bylaws can be understood as necessary elements, but the more moving parts you have to it, I think the more complicated it gets for town meeting, perhaps.
I agree with you. My concern is to try to ease the burden somehow on those who have not connected but are now going to have to connect based on the bylaw. And I don't know a simple way around. That's what the discussion is. So I'm just throwing out options, wondering if any of these can help the individuals.
I mean, I would think situationally, right? In this situation, since these people are being required to do this, I personally would rather do something with the hookup, whether we temporarily reduce it in just this circumstance or something to that effect, then, unless we get to this later, then delve into any like payment plans and stuff, because that just sounds like a nightmare. And it sounds like a lot for, you know, whichever department, accounting, to deal with and have to follow up on. And I think in terms of like manpower, people power, so to speak, I think it would add up to a lot more than just giving some kind of a discount, if we feel strongly to do that.
Yeah, I got another question for Jim along those same lines, because I'm leaning in the direction Aaron is. I'm not sure the exact amount, but something between free and $4,094 as a discount. There's how many, and I should know this, I could probably dig through the pile of papers next to me and find it, but a typical home pays what in sewer each quarter, just ballpark?
I would say upwards of 8, almost to 1,000, if not more, you know.
I'm not typical, then the kids stop showering. Okay,
Yeah.
So what we'll do is, what that would do is, if those 360 homes connected, we'd more than make up for any connection fee with their revenue coming in each quarter on top of this, you know? So yeah, I don't think it's going to be a revenue hurt to us to lose that $4,000, but if there's really $2,000 of inspection services that go into making it happen, maybe that's what it is. It's a reduction in the fee to some much lower level, maybe zero. But I'm not worried about the fee offs, about the loss of revenue, you know, from the hookups.
The part
I think that would be more than covered by the new business.
I'm not concerned about the loss of revenue. I'm really concerned about how do we ameliorate it for those who are being forced to hook up. Jim, do you have any thoughts on this?
So the committee's intention was to, with the elimination of the fee, was that you're going to these, mostly people that have had, if you saw the list, which we'll talk about later, that have had this sewer by their house for 30, 40 years. And you're trying to give them an incentive to okay, it's time. You know, no matter what the penalty is going to be, you know, you're going to discuss that further. But we're looking for you to, you know, finally, you know, get off the pot, you know, join us. And that was the idea of the elimination of the fee at its whole. And this is the time, like Erin just stated, this may be the good time for this to where we are having, you know, 50, 60 to 80 to 100, you know, new tie-ins every year above this. So maybe this is the time to do it to offset those costs. I mean, we haven't had a rate increase for, what, 3 years in the sewer? And we'll hopefully, you know, we'll continue that. But with this influx, you know, if you get 150 out of the 300 and something units that we know that are out there, you know, it would be good.
I think one thing I'm concerned with, though, is from what Jay said, more of like setting a precedent and kind of having that issue. So is there, and this might be to Jay, is there a reasonable way that we could possibly word or do this so that it's clear that this is an extenuating circumstance, which is why there is a fee reduction or waiver, because the town is essentially forcing these people to do it?
Erin, I kind of like the idea that you hit on earlier, that where you move this into the hardship section.
Okay.
I think then you have a rationale there. And and you can maybe figure out some kind of discount there. If you were going to do it, I'd have to muse on that a little bit, but I think it's a little better there. I think there will also be, I mean, there's always going to be hurt feelings somewhere when you have a bylaw like this. But if someone that has a $1.1 million house gets a reduced connection fee, then people are going to complain about that too. So if the idea is to ease the burden, especially in cases of hardship, assuming that that is the reason perhaps that people haven't connected to date, then I would maybe put it in the hardship case, because then we have a rationale to defend it. I mean, towns do subsidies. We'll give it some thought, but it might be better in that location rather than offering it or just imposing it across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also
I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, I know that that's more of a policy question than a legal question, but I'm just trying to think out loud about it a little bit.
Yeah. I'd also like to consider looking at the actual connection costs and see if 4,000 is significantly higher than surrounding towns, and if that can be going forward reduced, Jay, not just a short-term thing, but just reduced. You know, did we grow too fast on that? Now that we're bringing all these new homes in, can we afford to cut it to, the 2,000 that the water has? And then if there's a hardship on top of that, then we address it through the hardship side.
I like that. So changing it in general, if it's appropriate to.
Unrelated to the bylaw. That can be a whole
Yes,
separate vote.
unrelated.
That's not even part of the bylaw, But should the bylaw pass, we can reduce these connection fees to $2,000 because we'll have all these, or some number. I'm using 2,000 just because I was throwing out the water. Because we have all these new homes coming in, we don't need to have this large connection fee any longer. So therefore, in perpetuity until the next rate increase, it's 2,000 or whatever dollars.
So do
That's
we
our new
then
thing.
want to word the bylaw in terms of the concept of the hardship? And as the board, we can review that if somebody brings it to our attention.
Yeah, I think that's later in the document, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
So-
I would.
that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
I think we drop section 1B as it's written right now entirely and then move into the hardship section.
You're
Because
anticipating where I'm headed,
Yep.
just to get to that point. So
Mhm.
let's do that, and we'll revisit it in just a few moments at a different level.
Okay.
But as
Sounds
we
good.
get other connection fees, we can decide what our connection fee should be, and maybe it falls to a reasonable level that.
Yeah,
Hard
that's,
doesn't
that'll be
diminish.
another issue as to the connection fee, but I agree, that's to be dealt with.
Mhm.
Okay. So the next area is enforcement. So I guess one of the questions is, should there be a fine? And if so, at what level should there be a fine? And if not, how else do we want to enforce it?
I think there should definitely be a fine, or people are just simply, there's going to be people that simply will not do it. So there's got to be some kind of a consequence. I'm semi-indifferent on exactly what that is. Like, I'm fine with what's in here. I mean, I'd be interested in hearing Pete and Craig's opinions, but I'd be fine with what's in here because something needs to be here.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm right there with you. There needs to be a fine. I think $10 a day is adequate. I mean, that's a significant amount if you put it off for too long.
Mhm.
If you miss your connection date by a little bit, we can do the hardship, or if you purposely dragged your feet and didn't even pull a permit until the day before this went into effect, what do you owe? Maybe 30, it depends on how long it takes to get in, but $300 if it's,
Mhm.
30
Okay.
days. Yeah.
Do you have any problem with section A there on number 2?
Do I?
Legally.
Legally?
No,
I'm not
I mean-
asking opinion on this.
We have the ability to charge fines. That's established.
You absolutely do. As long as it's in a bylaw, you can charge fines through non-criminal disposition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Then I guess we'll move on. We're going to accept that as written. Move on to exemptions and Part A of exemptions. Discussion.
I would remove, I'd
Yeah,
remove
that
the
just needs to
parenthetic
go.
section. Yeah.
Mhm. Remove the, but not within 6 months of the date that the select board started discussing this bylaw.
We just started discussing it 3 years ago.
Yeah, so that part's just gonna go.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, I'd put the date of this bylaw's approval, basically. or
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I would agree. It's got to be within the date of the bylaws approval.
Yeah.
Hate to derail this a little bit, but is somebody marking this up somewhere? Or should I be taking notes, or?
As a quality clerk, I have my own notes.
I was just going to say, the
Certainly
clerk,
see if I can,
we
I'm
have
taking
such a
notes
good,
as well, Erin. I'm sorry. I'm eating dinner while I'm
Oh.
doing this. So
That's
why I'm on
okay.
I didn't want to have the video on while I'm watching me eat, but I am actively listening and taking notes.
Oh, good. I just didn't want to drop the ball on, fixing the document, so.
Yeah, we're
no,
all,
and
we're
I've
all
got a
good.
copy that I'm working on too.
And if you are
Okay.
too,
My own notes as
excellent.
well.
Okay, perfect.
I am making
And
notes,
we're
but I know
recording
we
this.
have a good clerk here taking notes.
Okay.
He's got many years of experience in this area.
Lousy with note taking though, for anybody except myself.
Okay.
All right, so this one's saying that if they had a new complying septic system within 5 years prior to the effective date of this bylaw,
Yeah,
then they wouldn't be required to connect to the sewer system for a period of 10 years from the septic's installation date. So if theoretically, if I got a new septic system today, and I could hook up, which I can't, but if I could, in June, let's say May, June, whenever it is, town meeting ends up approving this, that means I would have 10 years
no.
from, what?
We were
Yeah.
going to have the bylaw saying that the septic had to have been installed
Yeah.
longer than 6 months, say, prior to passing of this bylaw.
Oh, then we have to change this then.
Yeah, that's what my understanding is.
Well,
We don't want
I think we got rid of that when we got rid of the parenthetic that,
Yeah.
but not within 6 months of the date. I honestly playing the long game here. If somebody wants to go out and put in a septic system between now and June, assuming this passes in June, it's not ideal for us, but it doesn't hurt the town in the long run. And out of the 300 and what is it, Jim, 60, there's a number on there, people, if 10% of them get on, their own septic system, they've got 10 more years. It's not ideal, but it's also not the end of the world, in my opinion,
Well, my concern is people gaming it like you're saying. I mean, our object is to get them connected because in essence, the ratepayers are paying for the fact that they have that right to connect. So there's a flip side to this that if they choose to put in the septic and they then can buy themselves 10 years, that means the ratepayers for the next 10 years are paying some portion of what these folks would have paid. I grant you, it's not a lot, but it's there.
So what date would you use to start your 6-month clock running? Because that would have been January.
Right, I would
When
basically.
Or
we think
December.
about this from a logic perspective, though, I mean, if someone wants to game this, they're going to spend what, 25 grand?
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
And then they're going to spend it again.
Only in 10 years to spend what at that time will be roughly a $7,000 connection.
We're going to go down, Jace. Call it 5.
I mean,
Well, it's not. It's way more than that. That's just
Yeah.
the connection with the town. They
Right,
still have to have the contractor hook it up to their house, which is a significant amount of money.
yeah,
So-
there could be a fairly big expense associated with the hookup.
so it doesn't really, I mean, okay, if someone dislikes this bylaw so much that they want to throw away $25,000,
Let them do so?
well, I mean, I just, if someone does that, it's going to be very few
Yeah.
folks.
And let's go to the flip side of that, right? So let's say Mary down the street. I don't know who lives down the street, but we'll say it's Mary. Had to replace her septic 2 years ago. The way I was comprehending this section is that for a new septic system, 10 years would be a reasonable time after which they would need to evaluate doing something else, which isn't really true because you could have septic for like 30, 50 years, whatnot. So this is, I mean, giving them 10 years is something, but, you know, innocent Mary had no idea this was going to happen and, you know, spent all this money and now has 10 years. So, I mean, that's kind of the flip side of it. I think you're going to have more of that situation than you are of people running out to put in a septic and then having to pay almost the same amount of money later just to hook up to sewer.
Yeah.
And Mary's only got 8 years more
Right,
because,
she's only, I was just gonna say.
using your
Yeah.
friend Mary.
Yeah, because it's from the installation date. That's right.
Right.
Okay.
One
Yeah.
can ask why Mary didn't think about hooking up to begin with, but at any rate, people don't.
I guess my question is, I kind of like it the way it is. I can see situations where it might not make sense there and where people might be in trouble, but, you know, might not get the best value. But I guess, and I'm just thinking out loud here, I mean, if you said they put a complying septic, my fear is the person put it in 6 years ago who's got 4 years left under the 10-year thing, but has to convert immediately because we said it has to be 5-year-old or newer. So I don't know if we just say you've got 10 years from when you put your septic system in. Then if you put it in 9 years ago, you bought yourself an extra year of not having to do anything. But
This one's really tough.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not eligible to hook up to sewer at my house, but our septic is like super old, but it works. It works and we don't have to replace it right now. At some point we'll have to replace it, but it is far older than 10 years old. So I think the part of the argument is there's people out there, you know, like, and I have a family here. What if I just lived here by myself and, you know, didn't have a lot going on here? That septic might last like forever. So it's, that part's difficult because we're going to be telling people whatever their situation, oh, too bad, now you're going to have to hook up. So if we're doing that to everybody anyway, then I suppose we do have to pick some kind of arbitrary number of years in this case.
Let me ask this. If ultimately, I assume somebody could appeal to the sewer commission. We are that commission.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you have the 10-year law in effect, and somebody comes in and says, here's why I really need to extend it, blah, 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 are we not at least going to listen to the appeal? So if you leave it this way.
Well, what's the mechanism for the appeal?
It'd probably be under hardship of some sort.
That'd be my
May I make a
Yeah, but that's not an appeal to the sewer commission. There's no appellate process here.
Let's go back to it for just a moment. I'd like to clean it up a little bit to get to that.
Well, why don't you, to address Erin's point, the hypothetical where someone in, you know, is on like a 9-year or shorter than a 10-year thing, why don't you just choose a date that's 10 years from now?
Well, I was doing two things. I was going to propose that we just drop the rewrite 3A to say, in the event that a property owner has an installed new compliant septic system, strike everything after that, such property owner shall be required to connect to the sewer system for a period of 10 years from the date of septic system's installation. So if they got 8 years on it, they get 2 more years before they have to connect. Yeah, just strike that little between 5 and 10, you know, that little gray zone. The gap that's not covered. But then it gets into the appeal section and the hardship. So that's, I think, second portion of it. Unless you just wanted to say everybody's got 10 years, everybody's got 10 more years if they got a septic system, which I don't think is the intent.
Well, I mean, I want to be clear about something here. I don't read an appeal section here. I see
It's
a
not an
hardship
appeal.
section.
Yeah.
Well, what I was thinking is that if we're concerned about a situation where someone still has a relatively young septic system that is functioning and you want to give them a break because they just made a big investment shortly before, or, you know, within that window here, that 5-year window, then you could say 10 years from the effective date of the bylaw. You could pick a date out in the future that's 10 years. There's other ways to address that. You know, the idea is still to get people to connect, don't get me wrong. But if you're concerned about someone getting stung who, 4 years and 364 days ago put in a septic system, then maybe that's a way to do it. So they would get a full 15-year life roughly out of their septic system.
Yeah.
See, I was going to achieve the same thing, or the 10-year period, because I do think that it's 10 years from the installation of the septic system. I kind of like. I don't think you have to give that line that says within 5 years prior to the effective date of this bylaw. I think you can just say, if you got an working, legal, complying septic system, you got to replace it 10 years after it was installed. Now, we can argue that 10 years should be 15 years, but get rid of that bifurcation of 5 years, looking back. So maybe 15.
I tend to agree with you, Craig. I think simplify the process.
Yeah.
And make it, I'm inclined to go along with the 10-year from the time you install the septic system.
And then the second discussion is towards Aaron's point, what Jay's talking about. Is it 15 years from when you installed it? Not 10 years from the date of this bylaw.
Right.
But
Yeah.
15 years from when you installed it, which would be a little more generous than this bylaw is making out to be. And that's a question. I don't know the answer to that one, but that might solve a lot of that concern. I'm trying two things. I'm trying to find a bylaw that, number one, meets the town's need to get people to connect, but number two is fair enough that it will pass at town meeting. So, because even if it's the best bylaw in the world and doesn't pass at town meeting, it doesn't do us any good.
I'm concerned about, I hear what you're saying, but I think from a simplification perspective, I think if we go with the 10 years from the time they put in their septic system, I think it's a clear statement. You can't easily challenge it. Everybody understands what it is. Yeah, somebody who put it in 5 years ago only gets 5 more years out of it. There's no totally fair way to do it.
I'd like to ask Jim McKay, because my septic system failed 24 years ago when we brought my son home from the hospital. $300 hookup fee. Mm-hmm. Drew the plans on the back of a envelope. The DPW guy was not as thorough as you. And I had a contractor there that afternoon. But my yard has never been green since we replaced it. But how long does the septic system last? I mean, if it's maintained stuff.
So they could last, for 30, 40 years. I think that the Board of Health usually say they last for 30, 40 years. So just to clarify, just quickly give you a little background. The last sewer project that was done in Millis was the Sewer E project, and 15 years ago. And there was 3 homes that could not wait for the sewer project to go through. So they installed 3 brand new septic systems on Orchard Street in the lower end. I don't see another sewer project. You have to put some language in there. I get this, and it's very important if it ever goes, again. But so those 3 are already past their 15-year life, or if we go by this bylaw. Everything else, and if you look at when you look at the list, all the betterments have been paid. So it's a good 15 years. So like I said, there's 3 homes that are in this bracket that I think we're talking about right now.
Let's take Erin's house as an example. She puts one in, a new septic system in, and then we can buy her house in 5 years. Mm-hmm. She'd have 5 more years of septic after putting in a 30-year system. I'm leaning towards the 15. It sounds like what you're saying, Jim, is that probably encompasses about as many people as the 10 does, because they put it in 15 years ago.
Yep.
And there's an easy way, Jim, to see like the dates of everybody's septic?
Oh, absolutely. We can give you that report, how many, that anything on this list that's going to be talked about later, we can let you know who put brand new septic systems in there.
Okay. All right.
I would be very interested to see who's on the sewer lines who put a septic system in
recently,
less than 15 years ago.
Yep.
And I want to know how soon it's coming to my house.
Yeah.
It's never coming to my house, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd hook up right away.
Yeah. So I'm okay moving it to 15 years on the assumption, based on what Jim just said, but I'd like to see the list before we do the final vote.
I'm not sure with what Jim just said that it buys even the people who have 15 years that much. If any.
Well, what it would do though.
I'm looking about new people.
Yeah, in Jim's situation, right? In that situation, there were 3 people that just couldn't wait. Like their systems failed and they couldn't hook up to sewer right now. So for them, that would have been helpful. So who knows if in April somebody's, let's say there's 5 houses and their septics fail and they can't hook up right now. So they're forced to get another septic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then
I
5
think
years
it's
later,
those
come by their
people.
house. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward on this. I think the 15 years, I think 15 years takes care of everybody who's got it right now on the list is what it's sounding like.
Okay.
And then new people coming on as we run by their house, they have the option then, or give them 15 years to put that to amortize that 25,000 whatever dollar investment over.
So we're going to simplify this one. We're going to simplify this section just to say that from 15 years of the septic's installation date. So after 15 years from their septic's installation date, they need to hook up.
Right. In the event that the property owner has installed a new compliant septic system, such went too many pages.
For pre-existing.
Pre-existing, yep.
Such property owner shall not be required to connect to the sewer system for a period of 15 years from the septic system's installation date.
Right.
On the expiration of such a 15-year period, or in the event the property is sold, I'd still keep that in there.
Yep.
Or otherwise transferred prior thereto, or the failure of said septic system under Title V, whichever comes first, the owner or occupant will be required to connect to the town sewer system.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
I'm sorry, Jay, you were saying in the event that a property owner has installed a new complying septic system or has a pre-existing septic system?
Doesn't matter if there's been an installation of a septic system
Yeah.
prior to, I think what we're trying to do is
Right.
someone installed it prior to this.
Right.
And
Then I
essentially
think you just want to drop the word new.
Up to
Yeah, maybe it just
15
says
years
pre-existing.
prior to this.
Right, you don't
Yeah.
need new then, right?
No.
In the
Okay.
event that a property owner has installed a compliant septic system,
Yep,
such
Yeah.
property owner shall be required to connect.
that
to
makes
the-
more sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So that way the look back is a full 15 years.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's really going to address, I believe, unless Jim comes back with a crazy list that we don't think exists, anybody who's does not have sewer today, but could have it in 5 years and has to install in that interim 5-year period, that gives them a full 15-year life on their septic system,
Mm-hmm.
which is not great, but it's half the reasonable life of, best case life of the septic system.
It's
which
giving
is-
it's giving a rational process.
Yeah.
Jay, can you make sure that's written up appropriately?
Yeah, when I see the notes, I'll be able to
That's fine.
do that.
All
Okay.
right, so now we're on to the
Now we're
financial
at
hardship.
Financial hardship. So. Okay, comments on that?
All right, so what we're saying is if they apply to us and we determine it's a hardship situation, then they can wait 3 years to connect. No more than 3 years. Do we want to, so in this section, do we want to add to this section, like if it is a financial hardship, do we want to talk about if we want to reduce or waive the hookup fee and give them extra time? I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a ton we can do outside of that.
You're giving them 3
Yeah,
years
I
is kind of a
think-
subsidy already. I mean, you're allowing them 3 years to figure out how they're going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
I'm not sure you really, just to make Jim's life a little bit easier, make the collector's
Yeah.
job a little easier, treasurer. 3 years is the window at which they can figure out how they're going to have to scrape it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That takes care of those first 3 sections.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the section 4, which needs a lot of work,
Section 5, you mean?
No, 4.
4.
4 has like just a
Regulation.
sentence.
Which is all it should have.
Oh, is it?
Right.
Okay, okay, that's
It just
good.
says that we can do whatever we need to do to make this work.
Oh, all right, I didn't know
Yeah,
if we
like
needed
you're
more
gonna do
in there.
things like, yeah, you're gonna do things like define what the installation date is.
Oh,
So
okay,
no, 4 is perfect.
okay,
That's
I was
the
like,
way-
wow.
No,
Great.
I learned that in all my years of running Y Youth in Government, writing
Okay.
bills with high school kids.
right,
All
you don't
right.
wanna change, 4 is ideal.
Okay.
Because then at just a regular meeting of the sewer commission, you can change the regs
I
as you need
see.
to address some of these things. You could even implement, if you want, a regulation regarding a hardship financial benefit. There are things you can do there.
Okay.
So I wouldn't change 4 at all.
Fair enough.
So,
All right.
on to 5. Forget the wording that's there.
All right, so that's the last part, 5,
yeah.
okay?
5, what I was trying to get across in this arcane manner is a concern I have about, do we want to do anything regarding builders, contractors, people like that, who are potentially tying up the sewer? You know, we don't, here's the thing, we don't want to give them and say, yeah, you can build this development, and then they keep delaying and delaying, and we find that 5 years later, they still haven't put anything in, but they're tying up sewage capacity because we had to give that to them at the time. I don't want to use the word give, but you know what I'm saying.
Okay, so would this be in lieu of, well, I think this sounds reasonable that we'd require something from them up front for what they're planning. But, and I've sat in on some of the enterprise meetings, so I don't know where I heard this or if I read it, but would we be able to put some kind of like expiration on it too? Like how long, like if we charge them 15% of the rate for, you know, the size of their project, so we have at least that money, we're still not going to get our capacity unless they do something. And how long can they just sit on that?
Well, how about an annual renewal or something like that?
Can I recommend
Please.
here that, first of all, I think this is not a good fit for the other parts of this sewer bylaw. I think we're talking about a whole separate section. Second, I don't think it needs to be a bylaw at all and would be better as a regulation. What I do in other communities is when someone wants to reserve capacity and pay for that, there's a fee for that through a regulation, through just basic fee setting, and we make them sign an agreement that addresses the issues that Erin just mentioned, that this is temporary and they can't tie it up. I think this is less good in a bylaw, and you'll have more flexibility if you implement this in accordance with the same procedures that you implement other fees for sewer connections and everything else.
So we said it.
Then you can make case-by-case decisions too, because not all projects are created equal, not all projects have the same complexity. You may want to let them, some go a little further out and some smaller ones, so it allows you to make more contextual decisions. Bylaws are pretty rigid, so if it doesn't work, you don't love it, then you got to go back to town meeting to change it, versus a regulation where we have a little bit, or just the inherent authority of the sewer commissioners to set fees. You have a little bit more leeway to work on kind of a designer basis for each deal that you make.
Can I ask a question about a regulation? I agree with you on what you're saying there, as where it should go as a regulation, not a bylaw. After you've said that, it makes perfect sense. But if it's a regulation, my question is, can we set, once we grant somebody a sewer permit, can we say it's gone after 5 years? If you haven't hooked up, you lose that capacity. We take away your permit. You have to reapply, or 3 years, or whatever number we pick. You know, when we set it, or do they have it in perpetuity once we grant it to them, and then it's just charging them a fee every year?
I think I just heard Jay say that we can set a period of time for the granting of the license to.
I did too, that's why I was checking. I wanted to get.
So I think there's a difference here, though, between the permit itself and the promise of an allocation of capacity as well. Now, so I'm not familiar with the, like right now, with the process that you employ when someone comes in and asks for sewer, but if someone is looking for a long-term, like I've got a project that I'm not going to pull a building permit on in 5 years because it's complicated, but it's dependent on sewer, that's not really a sewer permit at that stage. They're trying to lock up capacity. That's a
And we just
different
won't
animal.
allow that. Yeah, we just shouldn't allow that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are two different things. I'm happy to get more educated on the process where you do issue permits and help work around that. But your question's a good one, Craig. Obviously, when you give someone a permit, permits can be terminable. I have to look at your process. We do special permits that expire all the time under zoning. So it's certainly possible that you either use it or lose it is a method that we can employ. I would want to look at that section of whatever you're employing now to make sure that you have that leeway to do that, though.
So as we write the regulation, we can review that.
Mhm.
I have
I
another
think so. I mean, I want to know what you guys have right now. So I haven't mined down that deep into the details of your day-to-day sewer operations and permitting. Those are conversations that Jim and myself and Mike can have, so I can get smarter on it, and then we could work backwards and develop a process so that you're never left in a situation where someone's holding your capacity hostage.
Mhm.
Jim,
And then I have a question.
something that I would like you to follow up, because we need to get a better understanding of the limitations in this regard. We can't be tying up the sewer capacity, particularly when we're at capacity right now. But you have alternatives that you can offer. I don't remember what they are, some kind of holding tank, and I apologize, I don't remember what the precise name is. But that's the kind of thing that needs to be put forward at the beginning of any of these projects also, is that they may not be able to tie into sewer, but that doesn't mean they can't go ahead if they do implement these other capabilities.
Packet treatment plan.
Mhm.
Some kind of a, and I don't remember what, there was a name he used, and I apologize.
It was a really weird name. What is it?
Package.
Package.
Treatment plan.
Yes.
Right, that's the
And
name.
Jim, you'd be proud to know that at work, we have one of those at our building.
At one of your-
The town would not let us dump to their sewer.
And-
So I have a $3 million sewer building at work.
So I would agree, so at this point, from what's just been said, I would agree with Jay that, you know, we certainly don't want to restrict ourselves more than is necessary. I would propose that we have a good bylaw, and we take 5 off, and we work together to get, you know, whatever the proper regulations are in place. And, you know, we can, you know, deliberate and negotiate from there on what that should be. But in my opinion, I think, you know, 1 through 4 seems as reasonable as we can get it. You know, this isn't going to be something that anybody's going to be happy with, but it's necessary. And I'm hoping that you know, people see that we've tried to be extremely fair through the bylaw.
I want to throw one, I agree with Aaron on that. I just want to throw one thing out there that I mentioned earlier that came up. A property that is a farm or a multi-lot place, and I was looking over the list, and there's only, I guess, a couple on here that are more than 1 betterment per parcel. But I'd hate to punish somebody who had, let's just say it goes down a street, pretend we didn't own the Braun property, and we ran the sewer down there, and that was 20 hookups or 40 hookups. I would hate to penalize that farmer, who's going to be a family farmer, has never filed a subdivision plan, has never done anything along those lines with it, and have him pay 40 betterments, you know, or 40, it's not betterments, 40.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
I don't know, do we have anyone in town beyond the 4 that you said are getting resolved anyway, Jim?
So we can use the Braun property as a perfect example. I mean, the way that the regulation was set forth for that was that that property, it did not have to be, if he kept it in farm forever, he would have only had to pay that one betterment. And then once the property was sold and there was a subdivision plan submitted, then he would have had to have paid whatever how many, 30, 40 units could have been built in that property.
Is there anything in this bylaw that would be, that would be an adverse situation for? I don't see it because we're saying you have to pay the connect. I think we're okay then.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure it was addressed.
So let me just say this a different way to make sure I'm understanding. So let's say I have a very large property and I know I'm not supposed to use the word stub. So just try to bear with me. Okay, well, I'll use the word stub then. So let's say I have a large property, and I like a lot of land and privacy. So I've got this property and I've got my house on it, but it's a big enough property that there's 4 stubs, right? So I'm obviously only going to use one. Even if I'm only required to hook up to that one, aren't we still like reserving capacity because there are 3 other stubs?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just not going to help. I mean, what are the options there? We'd have to make them, and if they're not going to use it though, so there's stubs there, so they're reserving capacity. But even if they paid a hookup fee, there's never going to be an actual because they're not using it.
I guess the question is there anything that this bylaw, good, bad, or otherwise, does about it? It doesn't help the town any, it sounds like. But it also doesn't hurt the homeowner any with this bylaw either.
Do we have many of these types of situations that you're aware of, Jim?
Nothing that has sewer that's gone by it. You have the list that that's in front of you that has that.
I think there were a couple. I mean, I just saw a couple on there.
Well, there were very few, if there were any. There was one that was going to be resolved anyway.
Yeah. So we might not have an issue to deal with here. It doesn't help entirely, but it's not. I'm comfortable with it. I was worried about it originally, but I think it makes sense now.
Okay.
All right.
So
we'll pass on the bylaw with all these discussion items.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay, you and Mike and Jim and whomever we want, can you resolve this into something that you can get to us in the next week or two?
Yep.
I mean, I can see Jay call tomorrow and give him a heads up, and then when Mike comes back next week, we can get together and finalize it. I can let him know what's going on.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, because the sooner we vote it, the sooner we can get it out there and start
Right.
for it, because this is going to.
Our object is to make
Be
people
difficult,
aware of what's going on and to do it in a way that's easy to comprehend. So let's get it out there.
And just so you know, I did start a PowerPoint. I think I've mentioned it before. Something that it doesn't have to be in that format, but something we could use to educate the town. So now that we've got the stuff more solidified, I'll just add some more information in because it was kind of more like a shell. And then at some point, maybe I can share that with you guys to see what if that's amenable, and then we can figure out how we could use it to help educate.
That would be great. Okay. Then let's move on to the other piece of this, which is the moratorium. Now, I'm going to preface this with a couple of comments. You don't have to agree with me. So, to me, I think the moratorium is only important in the event that the bylaw does not pass. Otherwise, we have an advisory that goes into place and say, hey, we have limited capacity, but we know with the bylaw having passed that we're going to, within a year and a half, have resolved a portion of this problem. And I'm not one, particularly when the Sewer Commission can override the moratorium anytime it chooses. I think the moratorium in that case becomes more of an advisory. I don't want to be in the position of discouraging somebody who has something that we look at and say, we really like that to come into town. By the same token, even if we pass the moratorium, as I understand it, the commission can override and say, no, we've decided we want this, and as a result, we're going to move ahead on this project, whatever it is. I'm not saying we're going to. That's not my point. My point is, to me, at that point, this is not a moratorium. This is an advisory. And that's the way I look at it. But that's in the event that we don't pass the bylaw. If we pass the bylaw, if we pass the bylaw, I don't see any need for the whole basis behind the moratorium. But that's my view.
Yeah. My view is a little bit different on that one. I think that they both are important pieces of our management of the sewer capacity. I think that the bylaw is a long-term solution, and it'll eventually get us to the right place where we can start having new hookups come in. But until then, I think it's important to give notice to builders and others that are looking to come in that we are over capacity. We have reached our limits, and we're not going to do any more. We're saying we're not going to vote any more connections at this point. I think it's fair to the developers to let them know, and I think that as you pointed out, we can override it at any time, but there better be a pretty good reason for us overriding it. And I can foresee that there may be the dream project that we've always talked about that needs this, and I can't tell you what that might be now. But if the right project came in, we can override it. We can rescind it at any point that we put it in. We did that with cell towers years ago. We put a moratorium on cell towers for a period. I think it's important to put the word out that we are not doing any more connections. And I think it adds teeth to the bylaw. I mean, because until we get that connection level down, we are not going to be doing any more, until we get our usage level down, we're not going to be doing more connections. I think they go hand in hand. I think that you put this in place now, you use it as you're talking about the bylaw to say, this is a direct result of us being over capacity. That we're going to get under capacity as past the bylaw. So I think it all goes hand in hand.
I look at it as, we're still looking at it as an advisory. We can override. If we see something that's important, we will override. And in fact, we have the ability to go over capacity. I wouldn't want to. I mean, if we look at what Medway has done, they've gone way over capacity. I don't think it's something we want to encourage. We have a year and a half, if the bylaw passes, to get ourselves back in sync. And even once we're back in sync, we aren't going to have a significant amount of capacity, or Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, available. So regardless, we want an advisory in place. And that's really what it is. And why make it something more than it's not when we can override it at any time for essentially any good reason we believe is in the best interests of the community, whereas the builders know from the advisor that there are limitations here.
I think it gives us more teeth on 40B projects. I think it gives us more teeth on other projects too that we're looking at. Not saying that I'm opposed to 40B, but it gives us the ability to have a much stronger case to guide the development that we want to see come into the town. And because Medway's over capacity and poorly managed, I don't take that as a reason that we should be over capacity and poorly managed. Shame on them for doing that, All
right, so I'll offer my few cents here. Before I do that though, didn't we talk about putting together something that's more of a policy anyway, in terms of what we're going to be entertaining for projects and developments? Meaning there's going to have to be a certain percentage of, 40B or whatnot. That's the first thing I just wanted to throw out there. The second thing I wanted to throw out there is that I like the idea there would have to be some kind of notice somehow to developers that we're not just, accepting any type of project at this time. I don't know that means we need a formal moratorium, because optics-wise, I think it looks really strange that, the Dream 40B comes up and we're obviously going to jump on that, and, then we're going to be like, oh, moratorium? We can still approve it anyway. So what's the point of putting in the moratorium?
Because it allows us to And honestly, if we're over capacity, even if it's the Dream 40B, I'd be very uncomfortable jumping on it. So I think that the point of the moratorium is to send that message. I think it's to manage our capacity, and it puts us in the driver's seat. We're not wide open for any project that comes in now, as we are now, that anybody can apply. And if we turn them down, I'd love to have that comprehensive plan you spoke of, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the ideal solution. We don't have that. So now we're stuck in a situation where any project that comes before us, we have no criteria to turn them down on that's officially voted, presented, or thought about. So I would rather not have projects come before us until we have that in place. I'd rescind this moratorium the day we finished a policy that talked about the development plans that we have in place. I would rescind this policy when our capacity dropped to a reasonable level. Those are all things that make sense to be done. But at this point, I think it's important to send a clear message that no new development, no new sewer connections are going on until we get our capacity down. I just think it's important to do that. Yeah.
Now, your argument was fair that, if we don't have the capacity, wouldn't be wise to jump on a 40B still.
Yeah.
But if we have a moratorium in place, does that also mean that we're not going to hear about any of these potential opportunities because no one's going to touch us with a 10-foot pole while there's a moratorium? So is there a chance we're going to miss something that we could feasibly incorporate just because we're calling it a moratorium?
If it already has sewer going by it, this is more a question to Jim, I think. If it's already it's already on a sewer line, it could be done regardless of the moratorium. Would that be correct?
Correct. So in the list, it gives you the parcels that, how many developments can be built off of it. So the big 40B that, that it's squeezed in, it would be a decision making, how many units are they putting in there? They would have to propose, like up the street here, beside Town Hall, that was he was gonna put 18 units. There's one sewer stub there. Oof. And there's only 3 bedrooms there. So he wanted to put 18, I think it was like 18 units with 2 to 3 bedrooms. So you have to take that into consideration of, it's permitted and the capacity for that one parcel is 330 gallons. But if you're going to give them, 10,000 or 9,000 gallons, that's a big difference.
Yeah. And I don't disagree. My concern is essentially what Aaron was bringing up. I don't want to be turning away something that when we review it, or have the builders not come to us for something that might turn out to be something we say, we really ought to consider this. I'm not saying we will do it. I'm just saying I want it brought to our attention. And I fear that the moratorium may preclude that. That's my view of it. As opposed to an advisory which says, basically, you're still not going to necessarily get it. But as an advisory, if you got a good, clean case, okay, bring it to us. We'll listen. And that doesn't mean we're going to concur.
And I got a question, I guess, for the lawyer in the room, the official lawyer. Are we in better position to drive our own destiny for development with a moratorium or an advisory, which gives us more authority to drive the direction we go for projects we want to see?
Well, looking at the example that you gave, Craig, with the worst case scenario where someone comes in with a 150 unit 40B in a location that you have reserved for, say, industrial or some other commercial, not in a place you want a tool to say no. An advisory doesn't do anything, really. It's helpful. What would be helpful, the reason it's a little bit of a tail wagging the dog thing. The reason you have the moratorium is so that you can develop the advisory or the policy that says, let's say, for example, and this is a real life kind of example from my past, that there's a part of town where there's development near wetlands or near a harbor or something, and that is on some outdated septic systems, and you want to make a priority to make sure those people get sewer. because it's environmentally smart to do, then this would allow you to develop that priority. Similarly, from an economic development perspective, if your policy wanted to focus on the 109 corridor between X and X, then that allows that policy to happen too. In the meantime, you're preserving the status quo while still having some exemptions here. You know, I think they can be helpful. It is a policy question. My concern, because sewer commissioners have the authority to say no generally. Obviously, if someone has sewer in the road and there's any capacity left, then they're entitled to a connection. A moratorium overrides that because essentially you're saying that there is no capacity right now, you know, with respect to certain exceptions. So I think it's a good planning tool and can be. That said, Pete's points, Aaron's points are still valid. It's very much in the policy sphere. I have lost, just anecdotally, hundreds of thousands of gallons to poorly planned 40Bs that we otherwise would have, that town would have otherwise wanted to allocate for either environmental purposes or economic development purposes elsewhere. And that's a shame.
Well-planned 40Bs, or 40Bs that fall into what we'd like to see. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I've seen poorly planned ones.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah. I'd like to be in the driver's seat. I'd be willing to look at a 6-month moratorium to give us time to write the policy. I mean, because I think, as Jay pointed out, and you know, and we've been saying, the policy is the right solution. We just haven't written it yet. But a 6-month moratorium would, you know, push us to do it, and it would give us the protection to do it during that period. And we're not going to lose out on a 40B project in 6 months. If they know we've got a 6-month moratorium and we're writing a policy, I don't think we're going to lose out on anybody, you know? But it gives us the protection to actually do it.
Well, certainly as a compromise, it's something to be considered. I would agree with what specifically Jay has and Aaron have pointed out. The real underlying issue is the policy. We need to get a policy in place.
Right.
And if the two of you believe that putting a moratorium in place for 6 months will force us to put that policy in place, I guess I won't object too hard. I just have this horrible fear, as you heard, about what the moratorium can do, but I don't think for 6 months it's necessarily going to be a horrible situation for us. I also...
Just through town meeting as well, we can see what the bylaw does.
Well, yeah. The part that I want to see more of is something, I believe Jim brought it up at previous meetings, and Jim, I apologize if I'm misquoting you, but this whole concept of the package treatment plants, we have to get a better understanding for utilization of those, because we aren't going to have enormous sewer capacity even if we do everything that we're saying we're going to do. Or correct me again if I'm wrong, Jim, please.
So Mike Carter, I think he explained it best at one of our previous meetings that he had worked in Ashland, and in Ashland they designed a package treatment plant. Number one, you have to have the land for it where, you know, it can be built. You know, do we want to use the land on Village Street that was just purchased for that? That's a board decision to do that. You design these package treatment plants, you know, for whatever the capacity of the land that you look at can build it, you know, that can hold. And then right away that frees you up to someday that when you hit your capacity, you're going to have to build that package treatment plant. So it alleviates it. It gives you years of you know, buildable, and are we ever going to hit the 633,000 gallons a day? But once you design it, you're going to free up that capacity, whether it's 100, 200, 250,000 gallon, you know, package treatment plant.
I mean, we've got it, all the leaching fields underneath all of our sports fields, beautiful fields.
Yep.
But, and we have a building off to the side that looks just like a DPW. The guy comes in every now and then to check it, you know?
But Aaron, what do you think? Is this something that if we did it for just 6 months, with the understanding that we need to put a policy in place, is that something, you know my feelings, both of you, about advisory, but I hear what you're both saying, what Craig is saying, and I'm trying to listen to what Jay is giving us advice on. So please let me know what you're...
I'm still torn, because I understand the pros and cons, I do, but in a way it almost seems like a silly exercise, you know, because as water sewer commissioners, we can still change that and pretty much do what we think is best regardless. But the need for the policy is very real and needs to be done. And I mean, if everyone's insisting there be a moratorium, even I'd say 3 months, but I think we need more time than that to get a policy in place. So if we are going to entertain a moratorium, I would not be willing to go over 6 months at all. I could probably agree to 6 months. I do kind of like the idea that it would at least get us through town meeting, and, you know, so we can see what happens with this bylaw. Because I'm sure we're going to have a whole lot more to deal with if this doesn't pass. So, yeah, I suppose I could go with a 6 month. It's not my favorite option, but if that seems to be what's best, I can join the club.
And I guess my view also is no Dream 40B, affordable housing project's going to approach us. Everything I've read, heard, and seen, we have to go solicit them. We can still have Bob work on that,
Yeah.
And with the understanding that, just as we said, we've got a moratorium in place, but the people that wrote it are the same people that are asking me to solicit for business.
Right,
So,
that's true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'd be very comfortable with 6 months to get us through town meeting, and then as Peter even said, if the warrant article doesn't pass for the mandate, then we got a whole other can of worms, or at least we got this in place we can extend if we have to. But I'd really like to have a policy written before then, and maybe the Economic Development Committee can work on what a good sewer hookup policy should look like and get it to us. That wouldn't have to be ratified at town meeting or anything else. That's just a policy of the board. So
Right.
we could put that in at any point of the year. There's no rush on that. Sooner better, but no time constraints.
I think that based on what I'm hearing, and since the town meeting becomes a key point in this whole process, that we ought to gate everything to that time period, 6 months, 5 months, I don't care. But the key is to put a policy in place. A secondary issue, of course, is if the bylaw doesn't pass, but that's a whole different issue. So,
And the other piece of this is it can be rescinded. If we finish that policy, we're happy with the policy, we implement the policy in 3 months, we can rescind the moratorium, and say, read the new policy. But it does protect us while we're working, is the way I see it.
Is that true?
What I'm
So
looking
that's-
for it is it
That's what Jay
gives
said.
us an impetus to get this policy done, which we have to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
May I ask a very legalese kind of question? I got a blank document with 3 blank lines in it. the template for the moratorium.
Oh,
This article shall become effective on and shall remain effective during the period beginning and ending. What kind of notice do we give on a moratorium like this, and that type of thing, by starting to fill in dates? Mr. Tollerman, can you advise on that? The effective period of Article 1.2, this article shall become effective on. Is there a policy or a recommendation on how quickly do you implement, what kind of notice needs to be given, those kind of items for dates?
I mean, there's no real requirement. I do think that there is some, a little bit of common sense to what Pete suggested, that you have it become effective maybe a little closer to town meeting, or kind of right around that time, and go for 6 months rather than having this beginning and ending. pick a date and then make it last for your 6 months. You could certainly, there's no legal requirements for notice, but you're obviously, for the benefit of the business community, you're probably going to want to give as much notice as you can by putting it on the website or having it covered in the little local paper or whatever it may be.
Is there any benefit to, so let's say, I just really want to keep this simple. So let's say we start the moratorium today, and is there any benefit to ending it? Like, will it make any difference if we end it with the end of fiscal year, or does that just not matter? I'm just not thinking of whether anything's impacted by that. If it's completely unrelated, then I just throw in like July 31st, something. It's 31 days.
It's unrelated.
Unrelated. Okay.
Yeah, to the fiscal year. Let me add. I like the idea of a short one. I do know, I am cognizant of the fact, and you could always extend it if you're not quite ready. The wheels of municipal governance don't always go as quickly as we'd like them to. We're going to be in town meeting season in a month. I'm a little concerned that if you started it soon, that you're going to just be extending it because if you have some number of cooks in the kitchen, I'm not saying too many cooks in the kitchen, but there's going to be some number of cooks in the kitchen on the policy side. I'm not entirely confident that you're going to get the policy done in 6 months.
What if we said it was, I don't know, we might be able to if the economic development is not going to be closely aligned with town meeting work. Maybe they can look at it some, that their work is not like the Capitol and like the Select Board and the Finance Committee, where it's town meeting driven, besides this one article that we've already got done. But if we started on 3/1 and ended on 7/31 or something like that, is that too rushed?
I mean, I'm okay with it.
I prefer dating it to the town
That's
meeting.
5 months then, Craig, right?
Yeah, I'm okay with 5 months. I was using 6 as an example,
I'm wondering.
Maybe we don't hit it, but.
Do we want to gate it to town meeting is what I'm wondering.
I don't know if we'd want it to stop, like, right at town meeting. Right. Like, I was thinking, wow, we have to write a policy, and let's say somehow something superhuman happens and the policy's done in April. Like Craig said, we can dissolve the moratorium, rescind, yeah. But if it's not done by then and the decision of town meeting is going to come into play, I wouldn't necessarily want, if we're going to do this at all, then I wouldn't necessarily want it to end at the date of town meeting. It'd be nice to have a month of buffer so that we can regroup and figure out where we're at if this bylaw doesn't pass.
Yeah, because if the bylaw doesn't pass, I could see extending it unless we have our policy in place. That would be the only reason I'd push to extend it. If we don't have the policy in place and if the
I suppose that there's another way to look at it, and that is the likelihood we're going to be passing, with all the other things going on between now and town meeting, the likelihood we're going to pass more building opportunities between now and then is fairly slim. It doesn't normally happen at this time of year. And we basically prepare the moratorium for subsequent to town meeting in the event that the bylaw doesn't pass, because then we're going to have to do something. There isn't any question at that point.
Yeah, but I just think that, I'd rather be protected going into town meeting, use this as a piece that we can't do new development until that bylaw passes that allows us to force people to connect, gets our capacity down, all of those things. Because this is a pretty powerful statement, symbolic and real, about growth. So I think it goes, I think the 3/1 to 7/31 buys us the time. It's only 5 months. It lets the developers know, and it puts us on notice that we need to do stuff. We need to get that, that planning document together. And the minute we get a planning document that we all like, policy document, I'll propose rescinding it. You know, it's my goal is the policy document. But until we have that, I want to make sure we're covered and protected.
Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Gazinski if you have any suggestions in this area.
I mean, actually, after listening to this discussion, I think you're on the right track from my perspective. I think a 6-month moratorium where the board has the authority at any time it so chooses to terminate it early. Once you reach a point where you feel it's acceptable is I think is good policy and allows you that time to develop the policy document you're looking to develop and have it ready for this summer. So I think it's a solid approach.
Okay. Then
So
I'd
to
suggest
finish this, yeah.
need to put together the moratorium document, which should be pretty straightforward in my estimation.
I think we have the
So I'll ask
template for it
Mr.
here.
Kellerman. Hello?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
think we have this.
I apologize.
No, I thought we have the template for it right here in our minutes, you know,
Well,
for our package.
I don't see that, but what I do believe is it's fairly straightforward and something that Mr. Tellerman can probably put into form for us fairly quickly. Is that correct, Jay?
Sure, whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I
I'm
don't
looking at
know.
the last 2 pages of the packet, and I
Yeah.
do see a moratorium on sewer connections there, the very last 2 pages. And there's 4 blank lines in it. Did Jay write this, or is this?
I mean, there's something that doesn't have a space in it even. Where'd it come from?
Where it starts and it says pursuant to MGL
Yeah.
Chapter 40, Section 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was from you, Jay, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah, do you
So-
see the last 2 pages, Pete? I think you must have
Yeah,
missed it.
it's a page and a half. It's on pages 49 and 50.
Yeah, it's not even, it's a page and an eighth or something, yes.
With 4 blank lines, and I think what's incumbent on us is to fill in those 4 blank lines.
There you go. I think so
Yeah.
too.
All right, so just because I'm a little anal here, under section 1.1, intent and purpose, the first, not the first sentence, but the first paragraph, can we just put a space after actual and daily, like between actual and daily?
Oh, yeah, right there after the word towns, comma, actual daily, sentence 2 of paragraph
Yeah.
2 of 1.1.
That's one word, Erin.
What?
No, I'm kidding.
I know.
New word.
When Wordle gets up to 10 or 11 characters, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so for the 1.2, the article shall be effective on 3/1/2022,
Yep.
effective during the period beginning 3/1/2022 and ending
7/31.
7/31. Yeah,
5 months is good for me. I use 6 as an example, but
Do we
Yeah.
want it to end in this fiscal year or next fiscal year?
I don't think it
Doesn't
matters.
matter.
You don't
it doesn't
care?
matter, yeah.
Mm-mm.
I asked that because I wasn't sure if it should coincide for any purpose, and if there's no purpose, then we might as well give us that month.
Okay.
Oh, so then the next line, the next blank line, I would think it would be 3/1.
Yeah,
That's correct, too.
I think 3/1 is fine because we're not going to do anything.
Before then, so,
there
yeah.
and then.
Then I'll make a motion that we pass the moratorium on sewer connection. I've lost it. With the date changes as prescribed, become effective on 3/1/2022, period beginning 3/1/2022, ending 7/31/2022, and special permits or constructions before 3/1/2022.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to institute a sewer moratorium starting 3/1/22 and as noted, ending 7/31/22 with the site approval starting 3/1/22. I'll poll the board. Aaron,
Yes.
with reservation.
Yeah.
I have much the same. Craig,
Yes. And I'd love to rescind this thing in April if we can get the policy plan in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what I'd like to see myself. And likewise, I'll say yes, but with reservations. And I'm, as you can tell, not really happy about moratoriums, but we'll go forward. So,
Mr. Chair, or maybe this question is for Jay. How soon is this something that should be advertised? Should we have this out on the website tomorrow morning? How soon does this go out?
There's no requirement, Karen.
Okay.
I think it's good policy for you all to put it out there. I don't know if you have like a latest news tab or whatever on the front page.
Yeah,
I think it's fair. I mean, it's 3/1 is going to come up pretty soon.
Well, I'm
Obviously,
thinking that gives people a couple of weeks at least. I don't know if it matters, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much it matters unless someone is very close to seeking an approval. And even then, you go through the regular discretionary process. But I think for future planning efforts, if someone's in their planning stages, it buys people. It's fair. I mean, again, there's zero requirement that you give notice. So this is just local courtesy.
Exactly. And then notify, obviously, planning board and those boards that they realize what has happened.
Yeah, Conservation Board of Health, the usual.
That's what I'm thinking.
use. Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
excuse me. Okay,
All right.
well, that takes care of this portion of the meeting. Let me just see if there was anything else. There isn't.
Can I just congratulate my colleagues on a very well done collaborative session to get through this stuff? I'm pretty excited that we really got through stuff today. That was really good.
Well,
Get to executive session and watch it all fall apart.
no, I'm happy myself. I mean, what can I say? Okay, I appreciate it. For those of you who joined us, I'm going to now end this meeting, and I'll poll the board so that we can go into executive session. For executive session, we do have a discussion of, and my screen just went blank, the Police Union Coalition, Police and Millis Police Association dispatchers, and the SEIU that we'll be discussing at our closed session, executive session. So I will now poll the board to move to executive session. Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Jermaine, yes. So we are now leaving this meeting. We will open the meeting again very briefly to close this session at the end of our executive session. Thank you all for attending, and good night. And see my colleagues shortly.